History often paints Alexander the Great as a golden hero, a brilliant commander, a visionary king, a man destined for greatness. But behind the shining armor and the polished marble statues lies a shadow so dark that ancient writers whispered about it only in fear, a shadow filled with brutality, merciless decisions, and war crimes that most mainstream accounts either minimize or bury beneath the dust of hero worship. This is the untold truth, the chilling chronicle of the most brutal war crimes of Alexander the Great that history tried to hide. Our story begins not with victory, but with fire. It was the siege of Thebes, 335 BCE, a moment historians often summarize as a punishment for rebellion. But they never tell you the screams. They never describe the moment Alexander, only 21 years old, unleashed his full wrath upon an ancient Greek city that had dared to defy him. After forcing the city's defenses to collapse, Alexander's army poured in with orders that were shockingly clear: take no mercy. In a single day, thousands were slaughtered, women and children were dragged into slavery, and the city, once the proud home of poets, philosophers, and heroes, was burned so thoroughly that even its ashes trembled. Almost every building was erased from existence, except the temples and the house of a poet Alexander admired. Imagine that, an entire civilization wiped out because a young king wanted to make an example. And this was just the beginning. As Alexander marched deeper into Asia, his legend grew, but so did the darkness around him. Take the siege of Tyre, 332 BCE, a spectacular military achievement on the surface, yes, but one dripping with cruelty underneath. Tyre resisted him for 7 long, exhausting months. So when the city finally fell, Alexander's fury erupted like a thunderstorm. Historical accounts describe mass executions on the beaches, with thousands crucified along the shoreline. Some sources say 2,000 men were nailed to wooden crosses, left for the sun to finish. Others were sold into slavery, families torn apart in minutes, their fate sealed simply because they defended their homeland. This wasn't strategy. This was punishment, a message carved into human suffering. But there is an even darker chapter, one that modern historians often soften, twist, or ignore. The massacre at Gaza. During the siege of Gaza, Alexander's rage took on a personal nature. The city resisted fiercely, led by the warrior Battus. When the city finally fell, Alexander demanded a symbolic punishment. Because Battus refused to kneel, Alexander ordered him to be dragged alive behind a chariot, echoing Achilles dragging Hector, but this time, it wasn't an epic tale, it was a real human being suffering a slow and merciless death. This act wasn't military necessity. It was raw ego, vengeance, and pride. And yet, history books call him the Great. But Alexander's brutality didn't stop with enemy nations. It seeped into his own army, poisoning friendships, loyalty, and brotherhood. The murder of Clitus the Black, one of Alexander's closest companions, became a tragic symbol of how power corrupted him from within. Clitus had saved Alexander's life at the Battle of Granicus. But when he dared question Alexander's increasing vanity, the king, drunk and blinded by rage, snatched a spear and killed him on the spot. A friend. A brother. A hero. Gone because of a wounded ego. And then there was the execution of Parmenion and Philotas, 2 generals whose only crime was being too respected, too experienced, and too influential. When rumors of conspiracy arose, rumors that may or may not have been true, Alexander ordered Philotas tortured and executed. Then, without trial or proof, he sent soldiers to murder Philotas's father, Parmenion, an old general who had served Alexander's father and had never betrayed Macedonia in decades of service. This wasn't justice. It was paranoia turning into bloodshed. The more the empire grew, the more Alexander's cruelty escalated. At the city of Persepolis, the jewel of Persia, Alexander did something that shocked even his own companions. Amid drunken celebration, fueled by pride, grief, and the manipulative whispers of courtiers, he ordered the burning of the royal palace. A palace that had stood for centuries. A palace filled with art, culture, books, scrolls, and history. Flames devoured it while Alexander danced in the firelight. Some say he regretted it the next morning. But the damage was already done. Knowledge lost. Culture erased. History burned. One of the greatest libraries outside Greece, gone forever. And then came the massacre at the Rock of Aornos, the brutal suppression of the Sogdian tribes, and the horrifying treatment of civilians who resisted his rule, stories often brushed aside because they do not fit the narrative of a brilliant, benevolent conqueror. But the truth is clear: Alexander's empire was built not only on strategy and courage, but also on terror, fear, and merciless punishment. So ask yourself, why does history sanitize his brutality? Why is he taught as a genius general, but not as a man responsible for mass killings, destruction of cities, and cultural devastation? The uncomfortable truth is that history is often written by those who admire power, not those who suffer beneath it. Alexander's supporters, ancient historians paid by kings, political elites, and philosophers who admired strength, painted his cruelties as necessary, his massacres as strategic, his war crimes as heroic deeds. But today, we look back with clearer eyes. We see the cracks in the marble statue. We hear the voices that were silenced. And we recognize that greatness built on suffering is not greatness at all, it is tragedy. Yet, within this darkness lies a powerful lesson for us today. True greatness is not defined by how much power you gain, but by how responsibly you use it. Alexander conquered half the world, yet lost himself to ego, violence, and ambition. He died at 32, not a symbol of glory, but a reminder that unchecked ambition consumes even the strongest. His story is not simply about brutality, it is a warning. A warning that power without morality becomes destruction. A warning that leaders who silence others eventually destroy themselves. A warning that history will always reveal the truth, no matter how long it has been buried. And as we uncover the hidden war crimes of Alexander the Great, we are reminded of our own responsibility, not to repeat history's mistakes, not to celebrate cruelty, and not to worship those who built their legacies on the suffering of others. Instead, we choose to learn, to question, and to grow. Because the greatest power we have is awareness. And if you want to explore more untold truths, more lost stories, more hidden chapters of history that the world rarely talks about in the aftermath of Alexander's early conquests, a deeper and more unsettling pattern began to emerge, one that revealed a man slipping further into the shadows of his own ambition. As his empire expanded, so did the ruthlessness of his methods, and by the time he reached the harsh landscapes of Central Asia, Alexander was no longer the disciplined young commander he once was. He had become a ruler who believed every challenge to his authority demanded absolute annihilation. In Sogdia, resistance movements rose like flickering flames, but instead of seeking diplomacy, Alexander responded with overwhelming force, ordering entire villages to be destroyed and survivors chained or executed to instill fear. One of the most haunting episodes occurred at the Sogdian Rock, where locals believed they were safe on a near-impenetrable cliff. Alexander's reply was chilling. He forced his best climbers to scale the deadly heights at night, and when dawn broke, the defenders saw Macedonian soldiers above them, ghost-like figures descending from the sky. Terrified, they surrendered, believing the gods themselves favored Alexander, but their submission did not spare them. Many were taken as slaves, their leaders executed. The further he pushed east, the harsher his rule became. Even in victory, paranoia gnawed at him, and anyone he suspected, soldiers, generals, even friends, fell to swift, unforgiving punishment. The whispers among his own men grew. Had their king crossed the line from greatness into tyranny? Yet despite the fear and bloodshed, the army marched on, driven by a mix of loyalty, momentum, and the unstoppable force of Alexander's ambition. And as his empire stretched toward the ends of the known world, one truth became undeniable: power had not shaped Alexander, rather, Alexander had let power consume him. If you're ready to uncover the next hidden chapter of this untold history, make sure you subscribe now, because the deeper this story goes, the more shocking and unforgettable it becomes.